Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 2. If you have not checked out the first episode on Julius Jones, I highly suggest you do. It's a very important case, and it needs a lot of eyes on it. But today we're going to be talking about John Marion Grant, which is also a Oklahoma case. Not all of my videos are going to be about cases from Oklahoma. If you didn't know, that's where I'm from. These are just things that have been happening recently, and I feel like they're very important to talk about. But the next episode after this will be about Lauren Cho. So, sorry that if you heard that, that was my laptop. So this story is slightly different from Julius's, and that is that John Marion Grant is guilty of what he's accused of. But he had a botched execution, and we're going to be talking about his case, his botched execution, as well as the botched executions of Oklahoma, because it's crazy how many there are. And no matter what your thoughts are on the death penalty, I do implore you to listen. And yeah, down below I have a case suggestions form. I forgot to mention this in the last video. It's a Google Doc form. If there's anything specifically you want me to touch on, submit it there. And all of my sources will also be linked down below. So to start off, John was sentenced to death in 1998, and like I said, his case differs, well, it actually differs a lot from Julius's. So Julius has maintained his innocence while he's been on death row for over 20 years. He's not anymore, but he still maintains his innocence. But the attorneys for John Grant, they're not arguing that he's innocent. And he supposedly has taken responsibility for his actions. So, officials charged him with capital murder in the stabbing and killing of 58-year-old Dick Connor Correctional Center employee Gay Carter. So, he did file for clemency, and he filed for clemency because of years of abuse while in the custody of state-run juvenile centers. Or rather, that's what his petition for clemency points to. I hope that makes sense. We're going to get more into it. So, the documents from his attorneys say that he was born in 1961 in Ada, Oklahoma. He shared a home with 8 other siblings and a neglectful, abusive mother. As an infant, John Grant's 6-year-old sister would take care of him in a house full of dirty floors and no running water. His mother would often beat her children, sometimes even when they were sleeping, giving him scars all over his body, and his attorneys say were confirmed by Oklahoma Department of Corrections documents. As a preteen living in crime and poverty-riddled housing projects at OKC, Grant would eventually be sent to multiple juvenile facilities for boys where he, like a lot of other children sadly, they would experience horrific levels of abuse. A 1981 report from 2020 won a Peabody Award for its coverage of the sexual assault, torture, and death that occurred in Oklahoma's juvenile justice system. Before Oklahoma established a foster care system, children like John Grant were placed in rural facilities. I'm sorry, I have trouble saying that word. According to documents from his attorneys, quote, whippings, rapes, and assaults were routinely inflicted on the children in these institutions, including Mr. Grant, who was there during the height of the abuse in the late 1970s, end quote. According to the report, high-level officials were aware of the abuse, and we're now going to get into what happened to the children more in depth. So I will have put a trigger warning on the screen at the very beginning of the video, and here's another one just in case you wanted to keep going. It's not good. You're fine. I'm sorry if you hear that. That is my dog snoring right next to me. But the children were hospitalized with broken bones after being attacked by adult staff, forced to commit sex acts, with the adult staff recruited to join prostitution rings, provided with illegal drugs by the supervisors, thrown into 5x8 solitary confinement cells for weeks at a time, supervised by sexual offenders who weren't properly vetted. That is just so upsetting. I don't care what these children did to end up in a juvenile facility. That is just disgusting treatment for anybody, let alone children. But the attorneys for the death row inmate, John Grant, say he experienced most, if not each of these abuses. And when I say this, I do want to say that I'm not excusing what he did to Gay Carter or what he did to be in there. He did something wrong and he should definitely be punished for it. I'm just saying that this is kind of explaining how he turned out the way he did and trying to give you a little bit of a backstory so you can kind of understand that his upbringing had a lot to do with how he was as a person, I believe. But continuing on, they say it was this abuse at the hands of the state combined with a neglectful parent that led to Grant's killing of Gay Carter. While Grant was serving time for armed robbery, he stabbed and killed Carter, a prison kitchen manager, in 1998. Motivation for the killing was unclear at the time. Some reports indicated Grant had recently lost his job in the kitchen due to fighting with another inmate, according to the Oklahoman. So, now we're going to talk about him filing for clemency. So, this is attorney Sarah Jernigan's direct quote that says, John Grant took full responsibility for the murder of Gay Carter, and he spent his years on death row trying to understand and atone for his actions more than any other client I have worked with. Quote. But Grant's attorneys argued that key facts about the crime and Grant's troubled childhood were never presented to the jury. They maintained that Grant developed deep feelings for Carter and was upset when she fired him after he got into a fight with another kitchen worker. This is another direct quote. Jurors never heard that Mr. Grant killed Miss Gay Carter while in the heat of passion and despair over the abrupt end of the deepest and most important adult relationship of his life, end quote. And that is what they wrote in his clemency application. Pamela Carter, who also worked at the prison and was there the day her mother was killed, rejected the idea that her mother and Grant had anything more than a professional relationship and urged state officials to move forward with the execution. I don't know if Pamela Carter will ever come across this, but I just want to say that if you do, I am so sorry about your mother's murder. She should not have been taken like that, and it was definitely not her time, and I'm so sorry because I know that you've had to live with that for a really long time, and I am so sorry. And I know that you wanted the state to continue on, and I hope that you found some sort of peace or some sort of comfort in that, even if I may not agree with the way it happened. I do hope that you are at peace, at least. But now we are going to move on, and we're going to talk about some statistics here. And we're now going to get more into the death penalty in Oklahoma and the botched executions from here. I will issue another trigger warning. This is a touchy subject for a lot of people because you're either really for the death penalty or you are against it. So I wanted to make this next part about statistics just before we actually jumped in to botched executions. And we're going to be talking about how Oklahoma wanted to execute people. It's a lot, so I wanted to give you another trigger warning before we continue on. So now we're going to talk about the statistics. So 7 men in total are currently scheduled to be executed in Oklahoma. 3 of the 7 inmates are African American. This means over 40% of the men scheduled for execution are black, despite black people making up less than 10% of the state's population. The alarming statistics add weight to the 2017 report, which affirmed racial bias in Oklahoma's death penalty system. In Oklahoma, state prosecutors are more likely to call for the death penalty in a crime where the victim is white and less likely to call for it when the victim is an ethnic minority, according to a 2017 report from the Journal of Criminal Law and Criminology. That is a statistic that should upset you, infuriate you, scare you, because it's not right. It's so obvious that something is wrong, and I think we all know what it is, so. But let's move on to Oklahoma's botched executions. So while the moratorium was in place, Oklahoma moved ahead with plans to use nitrogen gas to execute inmates, but ultimately scrapped that idea and announced last year that it planned to resume executions using the same 3-drug lethal injection protocol that was used during the flawed executions. The 3 drugs are, and I apologize if I say these wrong, midazolam, which is a sedative, zirconium bromide, a paralytic, and potassium chloride, which stops the heart. Oklahoma's death penalty system attracted international attention after a series of botched executions. In 2014, Clayton Lockett grimaced and writhed during his lethal injection after an issue with the vein used to administer the drugs. He had a heart attack and officials halted the process, but he died 43 minutes after the execution began. The state administered an incorrect drug to Charles Warner in 2015 and nearly repeated the same mistake with another inmate, Richard Glossip. Glossip's lethal injection was called off at the last minute after Department of Corrections officials realized the error, which led to investigations and what was expected to be a temporary moratorium on executions. Over the years, there have been repeated concerns that midazolam doesn't entirely render inmates unconscious. Joel Zivit, a professor at Emory University, has extensively studied the autopsies of executed inmates and found lung damage in those given the drug. He said the midazolam is dissolved in an acidic solution that destroys tissue when it comes into contact with the lungs in such large quantities. More than 24 Oklahoma death row inmates are part of a federal lawsuit challenging the state's lethal injection protocols, arguing that the 3-drug method risks causing unconstitutional pain and suffering, and a trial has been set. Now, we are actually going to get into the details of John Grant's botched execution. The execution was the first to take place in Oklahoma since several botched lethal injections derailed the state's death penalty system 6 years ago and has now sparked new concerns about the 3-drug cocktail being used. The State Department of Corrections Director Scott Crow defended the protocol Friday, saying that instead of convulsing, what Grant experienced was dry heaving, and that the state would proceed as planned with other executions. Grant's execution came hours after the U.S. Supreme Court lifted the stays of execution. So basically, John Grant had started to convulse after he was given the medication, which, no matter what you did, that is just horrible and inhumane, and that's torture. But of course, it's going to be dismissed as something else. So, John Grant was 60 and was strapped to a gurney inside the execution chamber, and he began convulsing and vomiting after the first drug, the sedative midazolam. I keep messing it up, I know I am. But he started convulsing and vomiting after that drug was administered. Several minutes later, 2 members of the execution team wiped the vomit from his face and neck. Before the curtain was raised to allow witnesses to see into the execution chamber, John Grant could be heard yelling, "Let's go, let's go, let's go." He delivered a stream of profanities before the lethal injection started. He was declared unconscious about 15 minutes after the first of 3 drugs was administered, and declared dead about 6 minutes after that at 4:21 p.m. That just sounds awful. So the string of profanities were said to be his last words, and I can't imagine how much pain you had to have been in. Listening to that is very upsetting. I mean, yes, he's guilty of what he did, 100%. I just think, in my humble opinion, I don't agree with the death penalty. I think that it would be more of a punishment to make people sit in solitary confinement or a cell for the rest of their life and knowing that they're never going to get out, never going to get parole. I think that's more fitting than just killing them. That doesn't make sense to me. Like, you did something wrong, you killed someone, now let's kill you. I mean, in a way, it kind of feels like when they're given the death penalty, they're kind of being let off easy. And I know you're like, well, they died, which yes, but they're not here anymore. They're not living with what they did for the rest of their life like they should be. They kind of escaped from that. And I don't know. I don't agree with it, especially when it's so inhumane. And then I can't imagine defending that and saying that, yeah, it's alright, it's safe, it's not. I can't imagine that. But I also want to add, because I didn't mention this when I was talking about his time at the correctional facility when it was the place where he murdered Gay Carter, that the reason why he was there and he was serving a life sentence originally is because he was serving 130 years, okay? And he was serving this for armed robberies. I know that a ridiculous sentence for a crime is not unusual, especially when it comes to a minority. We see it all the time, but I just want you to sit and think about that for a second. A 130-year sentence without parole. Yeah, I said without parole. For an armed robbery, or armed robberies, it's plural. Yes, you should not do that. Or no, you should not do that, I'm sorry. Yes, it was wrong. You should not commit robberies, you should just not do that. However, from what I was able to see, prior to that, he had not actually, like killed anyone, you know. They were just armed robberies. Now, I couldn't find exactly what he had been robbing, so I'm unsure of that. But a life sentence without parole for armed robberies. That to me seems very extreme and extensive. And we have pedophiles and murderers and rapists that don't even get 10 years. And someone who committed armed robberies is getting 130 years. I just want you to try and tell me how you think that might be right. I don't know about you, but I can't say that that's okay. So, that is John Marion Grant. A little bit about his backstory and what he went through and his execution, and a little insight how Oklahoma's death penalty system works and how fucked up it is and how much it deeply needs changed, because I don't think a lot of people know about how the system here works. It's so incredibly fucked up. But I do want to end this one saying that I think he should still be alive and he should be serving out his sentence for the rest of his life in prison, away from people, never getting out. I think that would be more of a punishment instead of having to go through that. Well, the only people I can really think that deserve that are pedophiles, so I don't know, but that's one thing I can't excuse. But yeah, those are kind of my thoughts. I don't want to go too deep into them. I know this one was a bit of a shorter video, but I do want to end this by saying I am sorry to Pamela Carter. Again, I hope that your mother is at peace, and I hope that you and your family are as well. And I know that nothing will bring them back, but I hope that you're okay now, and I hope they're resting, and I hope that you are finding your happiness. So that's going to be all for me today, and I will see you guys next time. Bye.